Welcome to another episode of Erik Wait Whiskey Studies, and I am really excited about this episode because I've got a special guest on from Andalusia Distillery. So if you've been following me along, in April 2019, I went to Texas, visited 5 distilleries, then did a whole month of Texas videos, did a whole Texas whiskey month. Then I went back in September, spent a week in Texas, and visited like 7 more distilleries, mostly on the weekends during that week. And so I'm sharing now the distilleries that I visited and having guests on. I already had Spencer Whalen on. I'm going to have some fellow whiskey tubers on who are down there in Texas. And so I am really excited about to have a master distiller of Andalusia Distillery, which I think, there's a lot of great distilleries going down there. If you've been following me along, you know how excited I am about Texas whiskeys, but there are certain distilleries that just sort of pop as being unique and distinctive and doing something very different, not just in terms of what's going on in Texas, but in the whiskey world in general. So let's bring on Ty. Thank you very much for joining me on my channel.
Yeah, great. Yeah, glad to be here.
So just a little bit, so those who aren't familiar, so there's a lot of people on there going to watch this, and they're just going to go, man, we can't get those whiskeys. They've been hearing the buzz, maybe, in the whiskey tuber world about what's going on in Texas, but they haven't been able to get down there. They haven't get their hands on, so they're not as familiar with what's going on down there. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into this and got Andalusia off the ground?
Yeah, sure. Most of my professional career, I've been a craft brewer, and so at breweries in Austin and in the Blanco area. And as I feel as we're all getting older, we're going to be drinking a little, maybe less beer and a little more whiskey. And I kind of felt myself doing that as well. Getting into whiskey more and more, and I still love craft beer. I do think a lot of the incredible growth that we've seen in the craft beer industry is probably going to slow a little bit at this point. And so not only are my tastes sort of shifting, I think market opportunities were shifting, and so a good friend of mine that worked at the brewery at Real Ale Brewing Company, Tommy Irwin and I were working together there. He was running the lab, and I was a brewer, and both kind of getting together and doing whiskey tastings and things like that. And that's kind of how it launched, and it's kind of why we make the whiskeys that we do. We only do malt whiskeys because one, that's kind of what we enjoy to drink, but also that's kind of where our production background lies.
Right.
In beer and working with barley and with malts.
So I come from a wine background, 20 years involved in wine out here, and mostly in California. So I'm a certified sommelier. I'm a certified French wine scholar, and so on and so forth. Got into whiskey while studying for the WSET, Wine and Spirit Educational Trust Diploma. One of the units was on spirits. It was about 3 years ago. And this thing I know, I'm off on a completely different direction, pursuing whiskeys. Traveled around Scotland, been to 40 distilleries in Scotland. Now 12, 13 down in Texas, 6 over in Kentucky. So you're coming from a beer background, which lends itself, because you're dealing with grains, and essentially a whiskey is a distilled beer. So you essentially took what was a previous interest in beer and then started going into distillation?
Yeah, exactly. Especially with malts, in particular, so much of the production process is similar to making beer. Specifically, we're dealing in off mash and off grain fermentation, a grain separation during the mash, and then an off grain fermentation and distillation. So all the equipment we already knew, dealing with mash, heating mash and separating and dealing is just very different than, dealing with liquids. And so, we felt from the production side, we knew we weren't also afraid to go grain to glass right away. Right. I think if you haven't really done a lot of brewing, kind of getting into the raw material side of it is kind of daunting for a lot of people that want to start a distillery. It's probably why you see a lot of people maybe sourcing at the beginning, because the grain handling, the mash, the fermentation, all that's really messy and a little intimidating. and really, there's a lot of room to screw up there as well when you're doing it yourself. And so I think it's, since we that was easy to us. That's something we've been doing on, all of our professional careers is making wort, making beer. And so, I think that allowed us to jump right in, get some equipment that really didn't cost us an arm and a leg, but we knew we had confidence in, since we have the industry experience. And, really, we had to learn, the distillation side, obviously, but all up until when the beer is ready to go into distill, we had a lot of confidence. But definitely a lot to learn with distill, as well. So that's been a fun journey for us.
So for those who are watching on the either on the replay or you're watching during the premiere of this video, I've got 3 bottles here that I picked up from the distillery. I visited. It was your 30th anniversary, and I didn't know it was your anniversary. I just thought, okay, I'll go down there, visit this distillery, do a tour or something, hopefully meet you. And man, there's this party going on. And I'm like, and Spencer was there.
And there's 1,000 people.
Holidays were there. Daniel Whittington was there. And a lot of people. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed being there. And I got to, not only did I pick up, this is the, of course, Striker Smoked Single Malt Whiskey, which I just poured myself a little bit more. This is the Remnant Oak Peated Whiskey. I was drinking a little bit of this before we started recording this. Really like this. And this is one I haven't opened yet. This is one I actually bottled myself, which if someone watches my review of this, they'll see the video. And this was the cask strength one that we got to hand bottle during the event. And it'll probably be a little while. I'll probably, after I kill this one, I might get into this one, but who knows? If I have friends over or something like that and they want to open it, then we're going to open it. But really, really, really enjoying this whiskeys. One of the things that's exciting me about Texas is it's so distinct, so different. When I first went down there, I went in not having really tried a whole lot, but there was this buzz going on, and went down there, and as this insane weather, I hit some of the really, really super bad storms. It was pitch black night during the day. Water is like 3 feet high on the highway, and I'm a Californian, and I'm going, oh Lord, there's cars spinning out all over the place. And I'm like, okay, this is freaking nuts. Lightning, it was a bit nuts, but yeah. I was on my way to Balcones. There was a river. There was a river going across their parking lot. It was kind of nutso. But it seems that insane, intense weather with a lot of fluctuations seems to do something special. So I've noticed Texas in general has distinctiveness, but then your distillery, not better or worse, just different from a lot of your fellow members of the Texas Whiskey Trail. So talk to me a little bit about your perception of Texas distinctiveness and then your particular distinctiveness.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see some of the big players that have kind of come out early on in Texas whiskey, whether or not it's Balcones or Garrison Brothers or any kind of the early players. They were all very distinctive, but for very different reasons, I think. Some of which had to do with Texas, and some of it didn't really. There's a lot of creativity that came from some of the distilleries early on. That definitely, it might have been part of the Texas spirit, but it wasn't actually Texas driven. But then there were a lot of whiskeys that were driven by Texas climate that were really unique because of that aspect of it. So yeah, I think the jury's still out. We really didn't know what to expect. With the finished product and our aging, conditions that we have, with full 53-gallon barrels. We do shipping container aging, so it's 130, 140 degrees probably in the summertime, but probably not that much higher than some of the hottest parts of the top floors of the rick houses perhaps in other states. That's really kind of what we're trying to mimic, is being able to get some of those hottest floors without quite being ready to build a rick house yet. I think the humidity, the temperature changes, all that. I mean, like for example, just a couple of days ago, it was high 70s here in January, and today it's 40s, and so we just that constant fluctuation of temperatures throughout the day and throughout the season and unexpected seasons is still writing a book that I think is not finished yet.
Right.
I think there's really the jury's still out on kind of what Texas whiskey I think is going to be. I think some people probably got an early impression maybe Texas is going to produce these really hot tannicky whiskeys, and it's possible, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't think our whiskeys are very tannicky necessarily. And at 100 proof, I think they're pretty easy to take. But so it's not necessarily going to be that way for everybody. I think hopefully.
So I'm really enjoying these, but if people come from some other whiskey background and then just reading the labels, they might have a certain preconception as what to expect from it. For example, let's take the Revenant Oak. It says peated. Now, I think 99% of the people, when they hear peat, you think Isla, you think, Ardbeg Lafroig Lagavulin, you think Highland Park, or even some of the, Highland peat. But this is very different. It's not oceanic. And I'm still working on my notes. I'm still trying to figure out the descriptors or how I want to describe this. It's almost, and this is just me, it's almost if you've been, if you're camping, you ever camp and you got the hot dogs and the marshmallows, whatever going on, and it's maybe a winter camping or just when it's colder, and you got your jackets on, your clothes on, and then when you leave the campfire, if you take your jacket and you smell your jacket, you get that campfire smell on you or in your beard. Or on your beard, you get
in your hair,
yeah. So to me, what I'm getting is it's the remnants of a campfire, but not like a normal oak burning or whatever. As if it almost reminded me a little bit of Mizunara, actually, of the Japanese whiskeys, that kind of character to it. But then some other sagebrush, wild bush, manzanilla, maybe. I know it just has these. It's something other than your typical, throwing a pine. It's not like a pine fire. If you go out to camping out into the woods, pine trees.
And it's you can pick up peat. I think I know what you're saying. It's not. It's missing the medicinal component of peat. There's so many kind of components to peat, which is something I really enjoy. I am not the peat guy in the company. Tommy's the peat guy. So this one is we'd like to say light. We'd like to say this one's light, moderate peat. It's definitely not a face milk. We will have heavily peated whiskey released in the near future, but this is going to be an everyday product for us, and so we didn't want to have something too aggressive. It's definitely there, but it's missing kind of that iodine, medicinal part. It's not just full on wood smoke though. You get right. It's definitely clearly peat versus, especially when you can try it side by side with the striker. Clearly the wood smoke versus the peat smoke. We're getting Irish peat from the Capaban area of Ireland, and doing all of our own peating, all of our own smoking ourselves, and that kind of allows us to vary the strength of peat, how much we're using, how long we're smoking it, how much we'll wet the grain beforehand, and things like that will all affect the smoke uptake and the final flavor of it. But it's kind of fun experimenting with the peat and getting to try different things, and hopefully one day we'll find some good regional peat as well.
Which is kind of interesting because when you think of, I only can think of, there might be another one, maybe someone in the chat or something. I only know of Connemara, which is a peated Irish whiskey. And I know probably back in the old days when they did, that would be what everybody was using, including Scotland. But I don't know of any other peated Irish whiskeys. And this is definitely absolutely nothing like Connemara.
Yeah. And so, since there's not many of them probably being made, not many people are using Irish peat probably. I mean, if they're all using something relatively local. So it's kind of fun to try new things. We've heard of stories of bog fires on the Gulf Texas coast and, long ago. And so maybe there's some dirt that'll burn somewhere around here. So we'll see if we can look around and find it. I'm sure it's in some protected estuary or something though, so we'll see.
So in your approach to making whiskey, I love the fact that Iron Root is Iron Root. They have a distinct identity. Balcones is Balcones. Garrison Brothers is Garrison Brothers. And Andalusia is Andalusia. And I can name a lot of other distilleries there. Was there any particular mindset or philosophy of production you said, you know what? This is what we're going to do. This is our approach we're going to take. And this is the profile we're going to make. And this is really going to distinguish us as not being better or worse, but just very, very different and distinct from our neighbors.
Yeah. One of the things we did is we're really taking a brewer's approach to making whiskey, especially in our mash bills. You can go a couple different ways. You can, get some really high-end base malts to really drive some of your malt flavor. Or you can maybe get, a more basic base malt and then use a lot of specialty malts, which is more the approach that brewers take, for example, when making beer. Whenever you're, wanting to add, unique color or richer flavors to your beer, that all comes from your specialty grains, your roasted malt, your kiln malt, and that's kind of the approach that we take. So we use a basic American base malt, and then come back with some Texas specialty malts. Munich malts, Vienna malts to add richness, malty, biscuity flavors to the whiskey. Then we'll come back with crystal malts of different varieties for your caramels, and then roasted barleys as well, between anywhere from chocolate to roasted barley to black barleys. All providing those rich dark chocolate roasted characters that often complement some of our smokier whiskeys. But we feel kind of taking the brewer's approach to putting a mash bill together. When I got into distilling, I was kind of surprised that specialty malts weren't used a lot. I was inspired by, Stranahan's and Westland. They're all using, or I'm probably using a similar mash bill to kind of what they're doing. That's kind of a similar commercial example, probably. And so by taking that brewer's approach, instead of relying just on Golden Promise, for example, or Marisot or like that, we'll tend to use a more basic two-row, American two-row, and then complement and augment with and layer more interesting flavors with specialty grain as well.
So in Scotland, they talk about, people might argue about the percentages, but they say 65 to 70% of the flavor of the whiskey probably comes from the barrels. So you're looking primarily, you look at bourbon, then you look at sherry, Oloroso, maybe some Pedro Jimenez, and then some wine experimentation. And now there's, I guess, experimentations with now rum cask and Madeira, and now even I heard tequila might be coming in.
Yeah.
And so the mentality seems more of making distinctions and differences with cask. There's some like 300 different strains of barley, but there's only like 10 generally that they're using. You mentioned Promise being one of them, but that's even a little bit more old school. But from what I'm hearing from you is, I don't hear we're doing this cask and this cask and this cask and this cask. It's really more focused on having a great base and then distilling that base rather than being totally dependent on the oak to deliver the flavors.
Yeah, it's funny. It kind of speaks to a couple different styles of projects. Whenever you're playing around with malts, it's tough because your results are years away. And, because you're talking about such an early stage in the production process. I think one of the reasons why, and we're definitely doing some cask finished stuff now as well. We just released a 3-pack of our whiskeys, all finished in PX sherry barrels. And so we're definitely loving that as well. Those type of projects you can kind of slap together in a much shorter period of time than you can if you're kind of playing with your malts. You can come from inception of idea all the way to market can be 6 months perhaps with the cask finish project. And so, I think we're seeing a lot of those right now because people are wanting to put out cool new things, but it's kind of hard to turn the clock back 3 years and to change your mash bill than what you were doing years ago.
Right.
And so one of the ways you can augment some of your work that you've been doing for years is to jump in and, with a cask finish, which can totally transform a whiskey, improve or ruin or whatever. And so, yeah, it's kind of fun, kind of doing those different projects. We're trying really hard to not shy away from those long-term projects. We just did a fun Striker deconstructed. So Striker is a kind of a layering of woods. We'll use oak as the body. We feel that's kind of the body of the flavor of the smoke. We'll use apple as a flavor, a little bit less apple, and then much less mesquite. We feel that's kind of a sharp accent. And by layering sort of those flavors, we feel we get a much rounder, fuller smoke flavor. And so we've done Striker deconstructed. And so we did you'll be able to buy a gift set of 3 small bottles, 1 oak, 1 apple, 1 mesquite, and you can make your own Striker, for example.
Right.
You can kind of use the different smoke varieties. And so those projects are fun, but yeah, don't look for that in the next 3 years or so. It'll be a while before that one's out. But it's kind of fun.
So in the wine world, because I always talk wine because that's sort of my background. In the wine world, you start with barrel land, plant a vineyard. You're looking 4 to 5 years minimum until you get your first harvest, first crop, and then you have to decide whether or not you want to use that, whether they're mature enough. You're looking 10 years, generally speaking, in terms if you want to add on the aging and everything else, until you have your first releases from a new vineyard. So you have to sort of project out, not only in terms of the growth of the vineyard and making the wine, but the market and the business side of what are you going to sell. So sometimes a trend comes in. This has happened a couple of times where people thought Syrah was going to be the next big thing. So people were like pulling out Cab and putting in Syrah, and then Syrah went, beep. It was a trend that came and went. And by the time people, their vineyards were mature, it was like, nope, it's gone already. They're like, oh crap. Now they're going back to Cabernet. Now they're going back to they go back to Cabernet, So in Texas, because of the distinctive climate and so forth that you have there, that time frame of plotting things out, where you want to go, what you want to do, how things are working out, it seems to me it's a faster track than, say, Scotland.
Absolutely. Yeah, even much faster than Kentucky as well. And that is to our advantage for sure. We're able to turn a product over and kind of learn much faster from it. Absolutely. For us, new barrel products, 2 to 3 years, I don't think we'll want to go past 3 years at all. We're already experiencing probably 25% angel share in 2+ years. And so I don't know if it'd be feasible to go much past 3. Right. So for new barrel, 3 years, maybe for used barrel, you never know, 3 to 5 years, perhaps, in our conditions and our heat and our containers that we have. And so, yeah, definitely much faster return of these, long-term projects. You can kind of learn a lot faster.
So one of the things on that, writing on that, and I've been asking a lot of different Texas distilleries, sort of the same question, because different regions and their take on this. So the coastal vineyards in California, they got the ocean breeze, more maritime climate. So they do vertical shoot position. They put the vines up to get more sun exposure. In the Central Valley, Lodi, it's just the opposite because it's a lot warmer. So they have huge canopies to cover up the grapes. So you have to manage things timing differently in terms of the maturation of the grapes because of the different climate. So the question, sort of carrying over into the whiskey world and Texas versus Scotland versus Kentucky versus everywhere else, is how do you go about calibrating the timing? Is it just a matter of we figured out certain patterns and we can kind of guess on how things are going to go, or based on certain patterns, or is it just a matter of always having to taste and go, okay, this one's ready now? Or how do you go about calibrating the timing on release and so forth and aging of whiskeys?
Yeah, it's tough. We do have a little more flexibility since, when we have an idea, the project's not going to be coming out for 2 or 3 years. And so we don't have to time things, quite consecutively, in order to get a project out years from now. That is kind of nice. But, one of the things that we'll do, for example, to kind of mediate some of the Texas heat, barrel entry proof, for example. If that you're going to be getting a couple hot summers out of this, aging a particular product, you're maybe concerned about, maybe picking up too many tannins, or too much of a kind of a high temperature spice. Maybe you'll go in a lower barrel entry proof, for example, to kind of help avoid some of that. So that's kind of some of the techniques you'd probably use to try to ride that wave of heat and weather, and then planning, trying to take into those things into account.
So again, I always have to do this translation. So just as in the vineyards, they do canopy managing to deal with or to mitigate the impact of the sun. And if it's a real cool summer, they might actually, just shortly before harvest, they start dropping leaves. They'll start cutting vines to get more sun. So, but what you do is you do your calibration going into the cask, and it's your calibration in a sense of the entry proof. That's what you're doing to sort of mitigate the perhaps over intensity of heat in the maturation of your whiskeys. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, sure. That's one of the things for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, I didn't see, so when I visited the distilleries, and if people watch my reviews of these whiskeys, they'll see some photos that I took there. So I saw the beautiful tasting room, really, really like that, and saw the still in that area. I'm trying to picture in my head. So, but I don't recall seeing, and maybe I just missed it, an aging like shed or warehouse or something like that.
Yeah, all shipping containers. So there was 3 big blue shipping containers there, kind of right on kind of across the courtyard from the distillery. And so yeah, we're trying to mimic those hottest floors of the rick house. Since we're not quite 7-story rick house material yet, trying to be able to get as much as we can. As far as the heat and the extraction, and so the shipping containers we're using, we've got 3 that we filled so far, and they've been working great for us.
So do you also have one? So for example, I visited Ranger Creek and did a tour there, and it's like a large. It's like you see them on cargo ships, you see them on back of trains, just big rectangular metal sheds, and then they convert it basically into like you have a smoker out in your backyard, you're smoking meat. It's like that.
Yeah.
It's one of those large sheds. They converted into a smoker, and then they have these shelves. So are you doing something similar to that?
Yeah, we have more of a shed style little building that we use for our smokehouse. And so we'll have a stainless steel firebox, a drum that we'll use to build our fire in. And then the smoke will be piped into the shed, into the smokehouse itself. Yeah, with racks of shallow grain. Yep, kind of about a 24-hour smoke usually for most of our products.
Did you have to do like a lot of experimentation to see, okay, we went too far, we went not enough, and kind of figure out how long it takes and calibrate that as well?
Yeah, how much you wet the malt, for example. At first, we started by dunking the malt, fully submerging it, getting it wet. We found that it really didn't fully dry throughout the smoking process, and then it didn't mill properly. So now we kind of do more of a spray application of water to the grain, varying the depth of the trays, the amount of the bed of grain. We found that getting more trays and getting shallower depths, because the smoke on the surface of the grain is kind of what's grabbing onto the surface. Yeah. So a very deep bed really didn't help you very much. And yeah, it's been fun, trying to keep the temperature low as well. We don't want to get any enzyme activation. So we're smoking 100 degrees normally. So just kind of playing around with all those variables, how much smoke, the amount of time. We haven't really found that we could over smoke necessarily as far as length of time. But we found 24 hours really puts a good layer on. Our smoked whiskeys only have the mash bill is maybe 10% is that smoked malt. So,
okay.
The Striker, the Revenant's definitely not a punch you in the face smoky whiskey, but it's smoky, and Striker's probably even smokier perceived smokiness on that. And only, maybe 10% or less of the total malt is smoked malt. Definitely less, actually.
That's another calibration. I guess kind of my buzzword for this discussion is how you calibrate the flavors to get the profile that you're at. So you're calibrating, you're figuring out the percentage of ABV in terms of your barrel entry, your timing of the smoking of the barley, and then calibrating and figuring out the percentages of smoked barley to non-smoked barley to get the profile you want in your whiskey as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because we wanted, whiskey to be smoky. We wanted you to definitely, perceive the smokiness. But, there's a lot of fun, really aggressively smoky whiskeys out there. We didn't necessarily want to do that for our daily drinkers, for example. And so, we wanted to have, good smoke on every taste, on every sip, but not so much that you get worn out. It's one thing to taste a whiskey and for it to taste nice. We want you to be able to drink these whiskeys, pour several servings of them, and not just get totally worked over and kind of tired by certain aspects of very aggressive flavors.
Well, there are some of us who are a little sadomasochistic when it comes to our peat and smoke. We like it rough, So
it's fact.
So Scott and Bart, Scotch test dummies, Bart, he really is a peaty guy, and the more peat, the more he enjoys it, and if I'm in the mood, I go. So you get the Ardbeg Supernova, you get the Octomore from Buccellati, these intensely smoked, smack upside the head smoke.
Oh yeah.
I don't want them all the time. But sometimes you're in the mood for it.
That's kind of the point I was getting at too. It's right. They're fun. To me, it's a treat. We're releasing soon a Rebnet Oak with 6 times the amount of peated malt that a normal batch would have, and so that's going to be fun for those smoke lovers. We'll have something for everybody for sure. Yeah,
sounds good. Feel free to sip during the conversation. People are like, "I'm drinking, but Ty isn't."
I've got a little striker finished in a Treaty Oak rum barrel. This is a release that sold out of last year, and I'm just kind of sitting on the last few bottles here.
There has been a bit of a sort of a rum fad going around this last year. Ardbeg Drum was in time in rum cast. There were various reviews. Some people really liked it. Some people didn't. I found it needed some opening up and stuff like that, but I came to really, really like it. But another point of, calibration, love cast strength, all right, but sometimes you got to tinker to get the water down to where I want it. I found the Supernova really neat, is better blending with a Corvreckin or another Ardbeg to kind of, pull the reins back a little bit. That smoke is sort of catches you in the throat. I like, though, a whiskey that I don't have to tinker with. I'm in the mood. Hey, I'm going to watch a movie. I'm going to read a book. Pour some in, sit down. But a lot of us, particularly, whiskey fiends, 40 ABV, 43 ABV. Come on, man. Give me something, So you're at 50 ABV, which if I'm going off my memory, I could be wrong. I think that's sort of the sweet spot for a lot of Buccellatis as well. A lot of the in terms of the core range that they hit at 50 ABV. So obviously, now this one here, for those who are wondering, this one's at 123.99 proof. Someone else can figure out what the ABV is in the math. I'll do that some other time. So it's 50 point sort of. This is what we tasted, and it came to where we want it. Or in terms of a philosophy of approach to releasing a whiskey, but I know both of these are 50 ABV or 100 proof.
It is the latter. Yeah, no, it's definitely not. It's not as if it's a coincidence and they're all perfect at 100 proof. We want you to be able to add a little bit of ice if that's your thing. A little splash of water, which is kind of what I prefer, and then kind of enjoy your own proof. We feel that probably a lot of these whiskeys are going to be ideal at perhaps a little under 100, not much to be honest, but somewhere probably between 90 and 100. So that kind of gives you a little more flexibility. If you start with an 80 proof whiskey, and you add any ice at all, in my opinion, pretty damn quickly, you've got a rather watery product,
Right.
and it's not much fun.
Particularly since, and we'll get into this, and this is another issue. I wanted to talk about distribution, get outside of Texas. Since a lot of your consumers are going to be in Texas, Texas has really warm winters. A bourbon on a nice big round ball of ice, or just an ice cube in there to drop the temperature is really, really, really nice. So you want higher ABV to sort of counterbalance that and be able to maintain some intensity of flavor. So if most of your consumers are in Texas, you got to keep them in mind. So yeah, it can do. I find these can go both ways. An ice cube, if you want to cool off a little bit, or as is, you're not getting attacked. You're not getting punched in the face with alcohol. There's no burn. The tingle I get is a spice. You can have an alcohol bite or a spice tingle bite. I tend to get the spice characters off this. I get a tingle off a spice tingle, not an alcohol tingle. You know what I mean?
Especially on the Striker. Some of the early Striker that we did, a lot of the Striker we're releasing now was had a little higher barrel entry proof than what we're doing now, and so we get a little more cinnamon, a little more baking spice, a little more of those. Kind of how cinnamon has that little bit of that heat to it sometimes, and sort of that perspective, which we don't mind, but we'd probably like it to move a little more towards vanilla and a little less spice, perhaps, for that particular product. And that's really the only new barrel product that we do, is the Striker. All the other ones have either are used barrels or new and used, and so that's really the only one we have to worry about. Is the Striker. But yeah, we feel it. I hate the term, but for 100 proof, the smoothness of them, is apparent, I think. But especially for the proof that they are. Any special release that we do, we'll definitely do cask strength, and it'll be 115 to 120 probably somewhere in there in the future.
I don't have any problem. When you're talking smooth, you're talking to texture. You're not talking to flavor.
Yeah,
I don't have any problem. I mean,
it can be a useful term. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a totally useless term for sure.
No. I mean, you're talking about a texture. You can say silky. You can say velvety. If you really get a lot of oils in there, you can get oily or creamy. So you're talking a scale of texture feeling to it. So I really don't. I don't have a problem. And I would say these are silky, but they do have a nice spice character to it that really lingers in the finish. So I get like there's the apple pie, the smoke, baked apples, caramels, and then you get the vanillas, and then you do get the cinnamon and baking spices, cardamom, and so forth on the back end, and some unique oak characters to it and some characters I can't quite identify, but I also find in Texas whiskeys there's this Texas thing about them that just says I'm from Texas, and it's kind of hard. I find it hard to identify, but that's there as well.
One of the things that we strive for, and I think hopefully it might be kind of what you're picking on as well, is there's a certain kind of hard to describe, and almost an umami meatiness to, let's say, Balcones whiskeys, for example. They're the most rich in this kind of flavor that I'm thinking of. It's often in the finish. It kind of has an umami blended with almost like a rich dark chocolate leather, kind of thing, and that's more savory. I'm sorry.
It's more savory.
Yeah, savory. Yeah, that's a great term. That's one thing I'm finding in a lot of Texas whiskeys. And that's one thing I really enjoy. It's one thing I've always enjoyed about Balcones whiskeys in general. Just sort of that rich savoriness to them. They have you can chew on them a little bit. They feel like you're eating a steak sometimes. Yeah.
So in the wine world, so New World wines, California particularly, or Australia, the New World has Old World counterparts. So if you're doing Cabernet Sauvignon, you think, and you're growing Cabernet Sauvignon, your forefathers is Bordeaux. If you're doing Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, it's Burgundy. If you're doing Tempranillo, it's Rioja and Ribera del Duero. You know, your counterpart is in France. You're doing Riesling. It's Germany, or Italy. You're doing Sangiovese or Nebbiolo in Italy. So every winemaker that I know, when they start talking about their wines, whether they're in Australia or in California or anywhere, or Oregon, they constantly thinking and talking about their counterparts in the old world and what inspired them. Not that they tried, because you can't imitate their soil, you can't imitate everything, but that's their heritage in terms of grape heritage, so that they get Burgundian or they get Bordeaux-like, and yet still distinctly California. And so when you talk about them, what they drink, they're drinking, if they're growing Burgundy, like Raj Parr, who I think is one of the best Pinot Noir producers here in California, he knows Burgundy like the back of his hand, and he can talk for days about Burgundy. He's been there like 100 times. So that's his inspiration. So in getting into whiskey, did you just, okay, I'm just starting from Texas and doing my thing here? Or do you have any sort of prior history in drinking whiskeys from, whether it's Ireland or or Kentucky or Scotland or anywhere else?
Yeah, when I first got into beer, into brewing, tried whiskeys and just didn't think I was a whiskey guy, and it took me finally realizing that I'm not a bourbon guy, and so the corn just for some reason just doesn't do it for me.
Okay.
So bourbons and to a lesser extent rye is just not my thing. That's just my taste preference, and so. Not being a huge peat fan either, I sort of stumbled around for a while looking for kind of my style.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I really kind of fell into some of the brewer styles, the Stranahan's, Westland, till I finally found those Scotch and Irish whiskeys that I love. So the Highland Scotches, the triple distilled Irish whiskeys, really are kind of where my tastes lie versus the classic American whiskey. You grow up, as an American kid, you're going to be having high school, you're going to be having, Jack Daniels and Jim Beam, and maybe that was the problem. I don't know, but yeah, just corn is just not. Yeah, I feel like I can be a fair judge on bourbon, but I never really enjoy doing so.
Right.
And so getting in, finding my home in the Scotch and Irish whiskeys, kind of where my heritage lies as well. Was kind of fun finally finding a place when I didn't think whiskey was my thing, because so many American whiskeys are bourbon.
Right. Any particular producers, whether Scotch or Irish, maybe something you have in your own home that sort of come to mind?
Yeah. Well, first let me start American. I'm really excited about what's going on in American single malts. With Westward, with Westland, with Kilcagan, with Stranahan's. Just really excited to see what the American single malt category will become. There's kind of an initiative right now with the American Single Malt Commission trying to establish an actual category of American single malt with trade guidelines and everything like that. So that was sort of my where bringing kind of traditional and kind of mixing it with American things and kind of making it our own. For example, the Rebnet Oak and the triple distilled whiskeys are very nods to tradition. Scotch and Irish style whiskeys, and then we feel Strikers kind of taking that tradition and bringing it home and kind of making it our own.
Okay.
And so, I think that was also kind of drawing upon kind of classic, craft beer. It's American craft brewers did invent a lot of new styles. They kind of brought traditional styles home and changed them. Like the IPA was a mildly or moderately hoppy, British beer. And then now it's just this Americanized hop bombs, pretty quickly. And so kind of, bringing them home, we feel if if Scotch had been made in Texas long ago, it would be Striker. Basically, it's kind of what we were kind of trying to take it back in time and rely on that heritage, but then put it in this present place here in this present time.
So in terms of thinking of the identity of Andalusia, you don't, because obviously I'm doing this whole thing on Texas, and so my focus more on Texas, and then whether you're doing bourbons or single malts is sort of second. My focus is on Texas. But as a producer of single malts, your identity and thought and your kinship or brotherhood, if you want to think of it, is not just Texas, but American single malts, because there's Texas issues in terms of production, business, growth, but there's also the identity and defining of American single malts. So that's on the table as well, and you have to sort of think in those. And so your fellow American single malters is also people you have to sort of interact with and align yourself with. Okay, what are we going to do? Not just Texas, but in terms of fellow American single malts as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%.
So if we could right now, by divine fiat, define American single malt, what do you think it would be?
I think sort of along the lines, of what we have, for example, with bourbon, we've got a few more regulations than we have with other whiskeys. And so, we wouldn't necessarily need, some of the strict guidelines as far as barrels are concerned. But yeah, just, made with 100% malt, I think that's going to be important. Very similar to a lot of the rules that you would have for single malt whiskey in Scotland. 100% malt, all made at one distillery. I personally don't have a desire for age limits. I think if a whiskey's ready in 6 months and it's awesome in 6 months, why would we not want to release it?
It wouldn't even work.
It's unlikely it'll be really good in 6 months, but why would you ever want to prohibit that? And so, age statements, I'm not, and barrel sizes, I'm not too big on, nor barrel type either. So I wouldn't want to be tied down as I think it's very important for bourbon to be tied down to new barrels,
right?
But not for malt. Malt has such a rich tradition of aging in used barrels without detracting from quality or anything like that. Any kind of barrel type. But I don't want to be too restrictive for sure. For allow for creativity and fun. But yeah, it's just all got to be whiskey.
So
that's
in terms of it. So we talked about the beginning of your background, where you started off. We've been talking about what's going on now, what you've been doing, and talking about production, and so the mentality in terms of how you arrive at this whiskey. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the future of Andalusia, the future of Texas whiskeys. So I'm a traveler. I'm already thinking about doing a couple of weeks in Ireland. I want to go back for my third trip to Scotland. I've been winking at going to Japan, and visiting this. But a lot of people, they don't have that opportunity to get out there. So, but they hear about these whiskeys. Some of us whiskey tubers, maybe we're sharing a little bit. So, where are you at in terms of, you think, maybe we're getting beyond the borders of Texas and distribution and getting more out there? Anything on that venture?
Yeah, probably near the end of this year to next year, we'll probably start exploring jumping into a couple other select states. Especially the whiskey fun states. And we're with Republic National Distributor, so we could stay with them and jump to a few more states. We're still very small. We're producing 2 barrels a week. Right. And so all still family owned and operated. We've only got a couple employees, and so it'll take a production jump before we have a huge distribution jump.
You don't even have enough to get out of the state. You got to have more.
Yeah, I'm really interested in kind of we'll see what develops with e-commerce here in the next couple of years. I'd love to be able to distribute to a state that could then ship to several other states, like that. So I think that's probably a strategy we're going to look at pretty soon. Maybe even kind of trying to become a part of some of the the whiskey tasting clubs, Flavor and things like that. And so that might help get us out there, especially the whiskey savvy people that love to hunt and find stuff, but still have no chance of getting our whiskey.
Right.
To at least give them a chance, let them mail order it or something like that.
Right.
So that's kind of what we're hoping on, is trying to develop and get into a state that would allow some e-commerce and allow us to then branch out from there a little bit.
So I know Texas got some funny laws down there.
Yeah.
There. So maybe the more immediate hope is not so much that you would have the production levels as such that you could have enough to go out, but let's get some laws changed to where, hey, I'm somewhere else in the United States. I heard about Andalusia. I want to order one and have one shipped. So is there some funny laws we still got to work on regarding shipping and be able to direct order?
Exactly. There's several states that kind of do some reciprocal agreement and allow a little bit of shipping, between them. There's other states that don't get involved in that at all. I think a lot of it's just about, regulation and, sharing tax revenue and hopefully, that some of that can get worked out. But, oh man, if we could do direct, shipping sales, that would change everything for us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So hopefully, the SWA can, not Scotch Whiskey Association, the Texas Whiskey Association.
Yeah.
Hey, the Scotch Whiskey Association would jump in too. All for it. Perhaps, hopefully, get some. So the Texas wine industry has done, I think, a pretty good job. They have challenging competing with Oregon, Washington, and California. But in terms of regulation and so forth, they've been able to smooth over some roads. So hopefully, the TWA or the Texas Whiskey Association would be able to work on that as well. Because
it's all about getting organized.
Pardon?
I would say it's all about getting organized, and I got to see kind of the growth of the Craft Brewers Guild in Texas and kind of how they joined forces and were able to finally hire lobbyists and get some legislation enacted that really benefited the industry. And so, the fact that we're just now sitting down at a table together for maybe a year now, as Texas whiskey producers, it's exciting to see how much we've done. And then this just, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, this short period of time. And so legislative efforts are definitely on our agenda. And now that there's a lot more of us, we'll be able to, for the longest time, there was just, a couple producers and hundreds of distributors and retailers. And so we were obviously, disadvantaged. And we feel that, a lot of the things that we want to see happen are what consumers want to see happen. We want to see more consumer choice. We want to see, more sales availability. We can't sell bottles on Sunday, for example, because
you can buy a cocktail, you can buy a beer, but you can't buy a bottle of whiskey. It's like, what?
Yeah. And it's nuts. Yeah, because liquor stores are closed on Sundays in Texas, right. And so we can't have an advantage. We can be open, do tastings, all that. We just can't sell you a bottle. Sunday would be a huge tourist day for us.
Yeah, I've been looking at maybe starting a new religion down there, a Texas church, whiskey church.
Right there you go. Yeah, that allows sales on Sunday. Yeah.
Yes, people come in, they pay their indulgences,
right,
and then they get a bottle,
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
So, all right. So perhaps some of my viewers are thinking, you know what? Let's go down to Texas and let's check this out, because you got some neighbors that are not too far away. Milam Green is in the neighborhood. Who are some of your other neighbors down there? I know I've visited.
We got Real Spirits, which is the distillery at Real Ale, the Texas's second largest craft brewery, big brewery right down the road from us. And then the Garrison Brothers, all within 10, 15 minutes. And then within another, 15 minutes of that, we've got another 5 or 6 distilleries, between Treaty and Revolution. A lot of guys kind of on the Dripping Springs area. Then down to San Antonio. So yeah, it's definitely the hot spot of Texas distilling. Is
literally the hot spot.
Yeah. So yeah, if you fly into Austin or San Antonio, both would give you access to a dozen distilleries in under an hour from either one of those.
Which is what I did in last September. Okay, so someone's planning on coming down there. Maybe not in the middle of summer, in the heat of summer, maybe in springtime might be real nice.
Yeah. April, May, June. Yeah, for sure. No July, August.
Although I was there in April last year and I was sneezing. Me and Daniel Whittington were hanging out and we were sneezing like crazy. That everything was blooming. It was beautiful, beautiful flowers. It's beautiful, but I was sneezing like crazy. All right, so someone's coming down there. Maybe 2020. Maybe we'll look see if we can come on down there. Got anything coming down the pike that they should be aware of? Distillery exclusives maybe it's coming down the pike for 2020. Anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2020, we're looking at, not in this particular order, but we're looking at a heavily peated revenant oak. I mentioned that one earlier. It's going to have 6 times the amount of peated malt in it. I had briefly mentioned the gift pack. That's what's over my shoulder right here. That's the box that'll have 3 375s, all similarly finished. And so you'll have 3 different whiskeys with the same finish, so you can kind of try them all side by side. I hope it to be an educational experience. If you're not sure, if you know what sherry does to whiskeys, well, try these 3 together, and you'll definitely know at that point.
Right.
So you'll see the differences and the common denominators. So PX sherry was first. The second one is going to be Mount Gay rum. So we got 3 barrels of rum from Mount Gay. It's the world's oldest rum distillery in Barbados. And then the last one will be a Hack Madeira. Hack is a winery in Texas that is legally allowed to use the word Madeira. They were grandfathered in. They've been doing it so long. I think there's only 4 wineries in America that are allowed to use the words Madeira. And
I did not know that. So I'm real familiar with Madeira. It's in the Portuguese island. They make them from Syrah, Verdejo, Boal, and Malmsey are the grapes. 4 prominent grapes that they use down there. Do you happen to know if they're using the same grapes or are they using some other grapes? Or
I don't know. I know in Hack they're using a Blanc de Bois and a Jacques grape, I think. Both.
Okay, 2 different grapes.
Yeah, okay. And the I guess whenever the trade laws were enacted protecting Madeira, they were already making it at that point.
Okay.
I know they started their business in the 80s near Houston. That's in Santa Fe, Texas.
Okay.
So yeah, just really fun to kind of learn about all the different wines. I started getting into finishing whiskeys. I wasn't about to put my whiskey into a sherry barrel if I really didn't feel like I understood sherry a little bit better.
Right.
So I went out and bought all these sherries, and that's not easy to do in Texas. There's not a lot of good sherries, and so but a lot more ports, for example, and other dessert wines. But that's been really fun too. Is kind of making the journey into wine. A lot of dessert wines mainly, and other types, kind of learning the aging, barrel types as well.
All righty, cool. So, hey, we're getting close to that hour point. This has been great. I could talk for hours and pick your brain and ask all kinds of questions, but I want to keep this down to about an hour. I want to thank you very, very, very much for coming on. So I'm going to put a link to the website for the distillery in the description box below. And if anybody has questions or they want to come by and visit, definitely check that out. And I highly, highly, highly recommend check them out. Again, all right. Thanks, Ty, very much, and greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric. Cheers, man.
Cheers. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.